No idea where this one came from, but I'm gonna read it anyway. So one of my player's family members passed away, and her character also has a master outside of Barovia. I want to make similar impact to her character, but show her my respect. Like, Strahd visits her and tells her master passed away as well. There will be a magic item and others, but I want to know if it's, like, okay for Strahd to spread the news from outside like a middleman. Any ideas? Thank you. Here's a great idea. Don't do that unless you have the person's explicit permission. I mean, seriously, there's nothing more awkward than having Strahd show up, and instead of fighting the party, the guy just goes, "Hey, it's me, Strahd. Sorry, your mom died, or mentor, whatever. Here's a magic sword from your arch nemesis. You're welcome." That might not be it. I'll try to keep this as concise as possible because character limit. Any questions, I will answer. So our main DM, who I'll call Victor, 18, male, has invented a new way to play the game called Small Shots. Basically, it's a series of small one-shots that function as a campaign where anyone can play and anyone can DM. Imagine a huge campaign divided into 2-hour-long games. A player can participate if they want to, just as how they can choose not to, and nothing will change. Think of it as being individual missions published in the mission board. Any adventurer can take them up or they can pass. Everything happens in the same world, so there's continuity in every mission. In this game mode, you as a player can have more than one character you can use for the small shots. For clarification, you can only take one at a time. So back on theme, Victor's girlfriend Marisha has been playing with us for a bit over a year and logically has amassed a good amount of characters for herself. In our D&D group, there's a good amount of artists, including myself and our DM, and I'd say Marisha is one of the most experienced ones, so it's no surprise that Marisha came up with the designs and drew all of her characters herself. This takes us to the situation at hand. We were hanging out and talking about D&D with Victor, Marisha, and 2 other D&D players. They don't matter. Marisha brought up that she had been working on a new character that she finally did a drawing of. She then pulled out her phone and showed it to us. And let me tell you, this character looked exactly like this somewhat popular video game character. I mean, it was basically a ripoff. Something to highlight is definitely her drawing, and it was a good drawing. There's no denying that. However, the design was the thing that caught my attention. I mean, the clothes were different. It was completely her design, and I can accept that. I mean, the hairstyle was also changed, as well as the colors, but everything else was exactly like this other character. So I said, "Oh, but that's just the character from X video game." Marisha kind of laughed it off, but I insisted that everything was exactly like this other character because, I mean, it's true. Then the others changed the subject, and we left it at that. The day after, Victor, the DM, contacted me and tore me a new one, saying that I acted like a dick and that I was out of line for being so insistent. Marisha put a lot of effort into all her characters, and this new one she's been working on for months. Now she's mentioning completely changing her design because she feels it's not original enough. Now, I agree, she comes up with amazing concepts and designs. I mean, her first ever D&D character is a spirits bard that's a runaway messiah of her own religion who's chained to thousands of restless spirits, and his design's one of the coolest I've ever seen. However, this new character just wasn't it. Am I the asshole in this situation? It's been a while since we've done one of these, but drum roll, please. Yes, the asshole! Dude, what the hell? Look, I get it. If a character is quoting lines from an established property and keeps on making references, I get that that can take you out of the game. However, somebody who has a passing resemblance to another character, or even a strong resemblance to another character, come on, guys. It's not really that big of a deal. In Shadow over Carconos, Kalia Solfero bears more than a passing resemblance to Arya Stark. Masao Takeda bears more than a passing resemblance to Jin Sakai. These are characters that definitely look like other characters, but guess what? No one cared while that show was running, and I guarantee no one cares now. Seriously, there's a good chance that the resemblance isn't even intentional, and even if it is, it's not that big of a deal. You haven't even played with this character yet. Just say sorry. Criticizing the design this much to the point where her boyfriend has to call you up, that's rough. It's not a big deal to apologize, especially for something as innocuous as this. But, I mean, I guess you could also go to the r/am I the asshole subreddit and try to get validation from Redditors. that's also an option. So hi, I'm new, and this will be my first real social media post. I was told to write this experience here since this was my first real horror story, and should share this with others that may have gone through the same thing. It isn't all that bad since that guy had it blown up in his face at the end. This is the story about a railroad, the rest of the party being turned into pawns, and an explosive finale that resulted in the DM ending the campaign. To set the stage, I joined this gaming group essentially comprised of family and friends. There were about 5 of us players, and I'll only list the ones that are most important. Me as the Dragonborn Barbarian, Stabby, the Goblin Ranger, DM as the DM, and ProtAgoniST, a human paladin. We've all played D&D before, but only Protag and myself were what I'd call veterans of the game. I hadn't played an in-person game since 2020, so I was very excited to be part of this one. The game starts off normally enough, we all introduce our player characters, and the party gets a rhythm going. I would honestly say that the intro sessions were great. Lots of roleplay, team bonding, etc., but it all changes when Paladin's backstory kicks in, and now he is some chosen one of his holy order. We all don't think much of this at first, but over time, his story starts to overshadow everyone else's. He's crowned the leader of our troop, had a story beat in all of our backstories, and important enemies who are described as near death 5 rounds ago only go down on his turn. Some were even backstory villains that had nothing to do with him, yet it still seemed like they were catered for him to deal the final blow. Since we were playing in a setting largely comprised of humans as well, me and Stabby were often made to work harder or secluded from roleplay sessions and meetings with important NPCs. As the story progressed, we even had to pay more for potions and items unless ProtAgoniST was with us. Only him, not any of the other players who are also human. Now let me explain. I don't mind a setting that has these kind of social dynamics in them. In fact, I can find them interesting. I can understand if there are injustices in a D&D setting, since most DMs do this so the PCs can make a difference outside of combat scenarios as well. But since we were at the whims of ProtAgoniST, and he was more focused on his own power creep, we never really got around to our own things. He would even use this world-building footnote against our characters later when he felt like we were stepping out of line. I tried to just roll with it since I was getting an in-person game. Half the people here were my family. I didn't want to ruin it by being a mope. I had already kind of checked out due to all the sidelining, but Stabby, my cousin, she was getting sick of it. She was starting to get a bit more vocal about the favoritism. This may have provoked ProtAgoniST to lean further into his own ego, as he didn't appreciate her criticizing his character arc. It's a bit late, but now it's here that I should mention that ProtAgoniST is a friend of the DM, who in turn is a friend of my other cousin. So before this, half of us didn't really know this guy. It is my belief that ProtAgoniST's behavior only began to change after he had become more comfortable with us. So at this point, it was a bit of a drag, but it was about to get a lot worse. ProtAgoniST got crowned as king of a new nation that he formed. Now, if everyone was a side character before, we were all pawns now. Barely any of us got any time to do anything significant outside of straight roles, as much of the roleplay was taken by ProtAgoniST. The rest of the party had already given up on our backstories, which was the most depressing thing about this, by far. We were nearing what I'd call the end boss of the mid-arc. The party had just dethroned an evil wizard king, and ProtAgoniST was doing his protagonist screen time interrogations. Most of us were checked out, since it had been about 8 minutes of just the DM and ProtAgoniST talking when the DM suddenly made the wizard try and kill one of the other player characters. This was supposed to be an epic in-game moment, I presume, but it would end up being the catalyst for the campaign's end. One of us tried to counterspell the wizard. Nope, it's too high of a level, and they failed the roll. So we asked what the spell looks like, and it was described as something along the lines of, "You all know it's power word kill. So what do you do?" Okay, now we're all paying attention. DM lets us roll initiative to try and roleplay our way out of this. Like it was slow-mo intervention. Stabby ended up rolling the highest. She aims an arrow and ends up killing the Wizard King. We all start to out-of-game celebrate because this was the first ever boss kill she'd gotten since, like forever. But ProtAgoniST suddenly marches his paladin up to Stabby and says, "You fool!" Now we're all shocked. Suddenly the Wizard King rises as a lich due to some magic stuff, and we all have to run away. Back at ProtAgonist's castle, ProtAgonist is going off about how we royally screwed up his plan. It is then explained that he and the DM had played a few one-on-one sessions without us, and that ProtAgonist had information the rest of us couldn't have possibly known about. He was also given an amulet that would have allowed him to imprison the soul of the Wizard King and gain new spells for himself if he had delivered the killing blow. Stabby then says something like, "Big deal, it's not like you need any more power anyway." But that did not sit well with ProtAgonist since his character was serious and deep, while her character was built off of a joke. By now, his anger is starting to bleed into real life, and he and Stabby are starting to get a little bit heated. Stabby, being the mature one, leaves the conversation in-game. The awkward table atmosphere leads to the party all leaving the castle to do their own things, leaving me and ProtAgonist in his throne room by himself. I think, hey, maybe I can roleplay now to progress the story and maybe get it into ProtAgonist's head that he should have maybe told us about all of these important notes. So I try to speak up, but he is having a hard time calming down and dials it hard into his roleplay. Calls us all useless and keeps on moping about his now missing power-up. I try again to reiterate that if this was so important, why didn't he tell us? And that's when he attacks me. Yep, he just strikes my character, saying something like, "I am the king, and I owe you all nothing."
Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king.
DM is a bit shocked, but allowed it. I think it's a one-off, but nope, he's taking his annoyance out on me. So I make my barbarian rage and try to run away. But he uses some magical staff to lock the castle entrance. The other players are trying to act now, but ProtAgonist says, "You all left. There is no way you know what's going on." I suggest we end the game here, but ProtAgonist forces the DM to continue since he is having fun again. So I just keep running away, locked in with this overpowered chosen one chasing me throughout his castle. I briefly think of just letting him kill me so I can drop the game, but then I remember something. A few sessions ago, we had stopped a band of pirates from blowing up a port. ProtAgonist had taken all of their gunpowder in order to try to make some homebrew firearms for his army. I ran straight to the cellar and hoped he would follow me. To play it up, I really went hard on the half hit points of my barbarian and said, I go into the cellar to try and hide. It wasn't long before ProtAgonist corners me in the cellar and starts to repeat his mantra that he always uses whenever he kills a big bad. I use my turn to activate my Dragonborn's chromatic warding, telling him to back down in character one last time. He uses his turn to roleplay some random on-the-spot reasoning as to why his character is suddenly being so violent against mine, leaning heavily into the homebrew setting views on non-human species. Now the table... That's great.
I'm just attacking your character because I'm racist. It's okay, though.
Sorry. Now, at the table, I'm pretty chill about this. So he thinks it's no big deal that he's going to kill my player character. He asks me if I'm going to roll a new character and even suggests that we should bring him in to blend in with the kingdom better. His next turn, he attacks me. I'm barely alive due to barbarian rage at this point, but it's all I need. On my next turn, I use my breath weapon attack on the room and light up the cellar full of gunpowder. Now, in the previous session where ProtAgonist had gotten his gunpowder stock, ProtAgonist had ruled that each exploding barrel was equal to one fireball spell, which the DM allowed. Realizing now that all of his barrels were lighting up in his face, he tried to rule that they were more akin to, alchemist flames. But with me and the other players having a laugh the whole experience, we forced the DM to stay true to the previous ruling. The DM nervously looked to ProtAgonist and agreed, and so the dice began to roll. Now, he collected 50 of these things, which were all base-level fireballs, essentially. At max, both he and I would be taking a total of 2,400 damage. I mean, the best-case scenario was 400 fire damage. Even with his magic items that have spell damage, there was no way he could have survived this, especially with us only being level 8. I, on the other hand, being a red dragonborn who had activated my level 5 chromatic warding feature, I was outright immune to fire damage. And that was that. Protagonist was dead, burnt to a crisp, due to about 1,000 or so fire damage. It was, of course, rolling using a dice app since none of us have, that many d6s. I stepped out of the burning hall like a corny action movie, and the DM promptly ended the session. For a while, Protagonist skimmed through his sheet and mine in order to try and find some loopholes, but came out empty-handed. About a week later, the DM messaged our chat and told us he was ending the game. Apparently, he didn't know what to do. Now, since Protagonist's character was dead, he had written so much of the plot around him, and there was nothing else he could think of. I said we could just retcon the previous session, but he just wanted to end it. So I'm without an IRL party again, but if it wasn't for my family also playing there at the table, I would have left many sessions ago. Honestly, blowing him up was one of the most fun things I've ever done in the game outside the opening. It was a drag, and none of us had signed up to be a pawn in someone else's power fantasy game. I never talked to the guy again because we never really talked outside the game in the first place. The chat died and we all just moved on. I don't know too much about Protagonist, so I can't in good conscience say he was a complete asshole to the core, but I can say he was at least a bit too full of himself, and is someone I wouldn't want to play with in the game going forward. I know this was a long one, but I hope you enjoyed this tangent if you made it this far. Thanks for reading. Of course, this was a great one. A lot of stories that go over 10 minutes can be a bit of a drag, but this was fun all the way through. We've got Airship, it feels like 5.0 at this point, but every time we think of a Mary Sue Airship type story that goes all the way back to DMPC main characters of old, we always seem to fall short. This one gets kind of close. We don't have the nice guy incel stuff of the original, but we do have a DM who is enabling a main character player, which is arguably even worse than a DM just becoming the main character themselves. It's so awkward to see a DM backing someone up to this degree, allowing them to become king of a whole kingdom and control armies and such. I mean, oh my god, the logistics alone. I mean, Matt Colville made an entire Kingdoms and Warfare book that I reviewed a long time ago to implement that exact system because the base game doesn't really support that kind of thing without a lot of work. So the amount of effort the DM was going through just to facilitate this guy's nonsense is just absurd to me. We addressed some other stuff in the mid-story commentary and the tavern tips, but there's so much nonsense here. Just at the baseline, don't be like this guy. Let everyone in the party take some spotlight, and don't be like this DM. If you see this kind of thing, stomp it out. Don't encourage it. Me and my friends have been doing a weekly one-shot group for a couple months now, with everyone taking turns running one-shots for a recurring cast of unconnected adventures. The story happened while the DM Sunny, usually our barbarian, was running a sort of labyrinth escape. It was a one-shot that consisted of me, Ravenfolk Cleric, Bear, Changeling Bard, Bug, Drow Wizard, and Paint, ASMR Fighter. The one-shot was pretty cool, actually, and Sunny made a whole pixel art map for the one session with plenty of enemy encounters and such along the way. I gotta give him props. He did a really good job, especially considering it was his first time trying to DM. It was going well, even if we were all consistently running into dead ends and somehow finding every single large snake enemy in the maze. We've been picking up hints, understatement of the year, along the way, and there was some powerful malevolent force that had trapped us in the maze that was only called Mother by the Minotaurs we spoke to. After about 2 years of exploring the... 2 years. After about 2 hours of exploring the labyrinth, we finally found a path out that led straight to the exit, with freedom in sight, which is when Mother showed up. As it turned out, she was a massive basilisk, and she really did not want us to leave. Combat started, and we figured we'd have to probably take down Mother if we wanted out. It would be a tough fight, but it would be manageable with the group we had. I don't remember the order, but on Mother's first turn, she grappled my cleric with her tail and set the paralysis in motion. Bear and Bug jump into action to help their companion on their turns. Paint had their character take to the air and abandon everyone. Of course, I will always advocate for making your own character decisions, but when you're playing the only melee fighter in the group of squishy spellcasters, it's kind of a dick move to just dip out. To add insult to injury, he just pulled out his phone and started scrolling through TikTok while the rest of us struggled for the next half hour against Mother. My cleric was fighting the paralysis and grapple, always just barely rolling well enough to not die, but not well enough to escape. Bear went down first and then Bug. I managed to finally succeed on my throw and get out, using one of my only offensive spells to deal the final blow, now that Bug and Bear had significantly whittled down Mother to death's door. I was able to get to Bug and save them, but Bear had already failed all 3 death saving throws at that point. We wrapped up the session, but it was clear Bear was upset about their character's death. They ended up going home early and left the rest of us hanging out. I haven't spoke to Pain about it because I've got problems with trying to bring up issues with them in the past, but if it happens again, I'm probably going to speak up. I might be overreacting since it was a one-shot, but the fact that they left everyone for the boss battle and then sat and scrolled through TikToks while we struggled to get out with our lives, it rubs me the wrong way. If it wasn't something that had happened in previous campaigns, it might bother me less, but as it stands, I might have to make a paladin should we lose our melee like that again. Dude, I'm gonna be real with you. Paint sucks. I mean, not instant kick kind of sucks. I don't know if Paint's a bad person or anything, but if this is repeat behavior, you've got to talk about it. Somebody repeatedly abandoning the party is rarely going to be seen as a good thing. The vast majority of groups would be incredibly annoyed, some even upset by that. At the end of the day, you're supposed to be a team, and somebody being so selfish as to leave everyone else behind, and then even worse, scroll on TikTok while doing it? I mean, come on, that's just insult to injury. That is just rude to everyone involved. Again, not an instant kick, but if it's repeat behavior, you should bring it up with the DM and the player sooner rather than later, because if it's repeat, that means it's a pattern, and patterns don't just stop themselves. We met up on an LFG Discord for 5th edition, and we all agreed to play. The important characters are the Cleric, Paladin, who's me, and that guy, our Necromancer. I am going to try and keep it simple by just using everyone's class as their names. So we meet up for our session 0. The GM introduces us to her well-written world. I will not go too far into detail, but it had to focus on the forces of good versus the forces of evil. But the GM made a mistake here in my opinion. She encouraged everyone to keep secrets about their character and emphasized that she would be weaving them into the story. Not to spoil the surprise, but the wizard's secret was that they practice necromancy. I think the DM should have outright denied the character as necromancy is evil, and it would have inevitably led to character conflict, but they somehow did not see an issue with it. Now to explain my character and hopefully give some context as to why it all fell apart. I was playing Aurum Lux, that's Latin for golden light, Paladin of the Holy Light. I made it his quest to vanquish all evil from the realms. His secret is that he was a deva, sent by the gods to bring the world back to the light, but his mortal body was too weak to harness his full power. The Cleric was part of the same order as my Paladin, meaning that her and I already started off on a good foot, but unfortunately my time with the Forgo ended before I could find out much about her backstory. The game started at level 1, and it was good fun. Over the next few months, there were no issues, but it seems that guy was just biding his time. Once we hit level 5, he struck. We were attacked by a solitary ogre on our way to kill a green dragon that was attacking the nearby town. We kill it with no issue, but as I'm ready to move on, the Necromancer asked us to wait. He informs us he can make the dragon fight easier. I press him, asking why he didn't think to tell the party earlier. He blows me off with a nothing sandwich of an answer, saying, I did not have the means to do so until now, but I ask you trust. I have everyone's best interest in mind. I gave him the benefit of the doubt since I knew the dragon was going to be hard. He prepares a ritual. Once it ends, the ogre gets back up, reanimated as a zombie. I was mad. Not just mad, but fuming. Firstly, an ogre zombie for a group of level 5 characters was way too overpowered. Secondly, seeing my above explanation as to why necromancy should not have been allowed ever. This is where I made my mistake. Aurum was extremely holy, and upon seeing someone he thought was a friend violate the natural order, he tries to apprehend him, ready to escalate this into combat. Well, I was wrong about doing this. In my defense, everyone knew his character was lawful good by nature. I tell the Cleric that she needs to help me capture him and take him back to the church. That way he can repent or be served a proper sentence. But what surprises me is she refuses. She goes to his defense, saying that our church has no explicit ban on the undead and that the necromancer is clearly using them as a tool to destroy a greater evil. This leads to an argument going back and forth between myself and the Cleric and the necromancer. Eventually, I ask the DM directly, is necromancy and the undead evil? She shakes her head and says, depends on the method and reason. You can bind souls into bodies unwillingly, or program a synthetic pattern to act like a soul. But necromancy isn't just evil for evil's sake. I argued, it has the ability to bind your soul to your body after death. That is evil, and we had no idea if the necromancer did that or not. The argument continued, now with the GM joining against me. I was completely ganged up on. We called it for the night, and in the morning I was kicked. I'm hurt. I'm mad. I can't believe they took his side over mine. I was relatively popular among the group until this. I hope I can find a group I can get along with, but there was something special about that one that I'm gonna miss. Oh boy, so last year in my home game, my party teamed up with a pastel-obsessed necromancy professor named Alice Feline to raise an army of the undead to fight against a vampire lord. It was epic, it was awesome, it was a great session. Could you imagine if it was all interrupted by some dude screaming at my party about how necromancy is evil and you must all be arrested? We have yet another first-person horror story, this time featuring a lawful stupid paladin in the driver's seat. And look, I really hope this guy finds another game. It sucks when you lose your group, but that's what happens when you scream at your teammates. They tend to not want to have you around. Character conflict can be cool, but it needs to be consented to. The necromancer probably had no idea this was going to happen, and you insinuating the situation, attacking the necromancer, and then arguing with the DM over her own world lore? Yeah, all of it, very bad form. Also, come on, he was trying to help you out, like legitimately help you out. Like, I would not be upset if we had an ogre on our side in a dragon fight. Come on. Alright, and that's going to be it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tavern Adjacent podcast where we talk about all things Dungeons & Dragons while also taking some of your voicemail horror stories. We just had Michelle Bradley on the show from Tabletop News. She was awesome, so yeah, you can check out that video in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment literal nuclear revenge to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And remember, if you want to submit a story directly to me for a chance to get featured in one of these videos, you can do so through my storiesforcrispy@gmail.com email. But even if you don't have any stories for me, hit that like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.